The neon lights of a small Nevada bar flickered against the quiet night. Inside, Steven Seagal sat at a corner table, sipping on a drink, enjoying a rare moment of peace. He was dressed casually, a dark leather jacket over a simple t-shirt, jeans, and his signature calm demeanor. Friends chatted around him, but he remained observant, his eyes quietly scanning the room. Unbeknownst to him, a police officer had just entered. His eyes locked onto Seagal immediately. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, maybe the dark jacket, or perhaps it was just suspicion born from a long night on patrol. Whatever the reason, the officer's face hardened, and he reached for his holster almost instinctively. "Sir," the officer barked, his tone sharp and aggressive. "Step over here, now." The bar seemed to freeze. Patrons paused mid-sip, mid-laugh. The clink of glasses and the faint hum of the jukebox faded as all eyes turned toward the confrontation. Steven, as calm as ever, raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. His voice was low and measured. "Officer, is there a problem?" The cop didn't answer with words, only a gesture, signaling him closer, hand tightening on the gun. The threat was clear. One wrong move, and it could end badly. People in the bar exchanged nervous glances. A few instinctively reached for their phones, quietly opening camera apps, sensing that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Steven's friends tried to intervene softly, urging the officer to calm down, but the cop's eyes were fixed on Steven, ignoring every attempt at reason. His judgment seemed clouded, driven by suspicion and arrogance. Time slowed. Every second stretched into tension. The officer's fingers twitched on the trigger, and then, almost imperceptibly, Steven shifted his stance. Not threatening, not aggressive, just prepared, steady, and completely in control. And that's when the bar went completely silent, every person holding their breath. What Steven did next completely shocked everyone in the bar, and would leave the officer regretting his actions in just 5 minutes. The scene was set. A simple night out had turned into a showdown of nerve, control, and courage, and no one in that room would forget it. The air in the bar was thick with tension. Patrons held their drinks tight, their eyes darting between Steven Seagal and the officer, unsure what would happen next. The neon lights cast long, flickering shadows across the hardwood floor, creating a scene that felt almost cinematic. The officer's grip on his gun tightened, his knuckles white under the fluorescent light. His face was flushed, a mix of anger and nervousness. "I said step over here, now," he shouted, voice cutting through the quiet chatter that had fallen over the bar. Steven, hands still raised and visible, didn't flinch. His expression was calm, unshaken, the calm eye in the center of a storm. "Officer," he said, his voice low and controlled, "I haven't done anything wrong. Can we talk about what the issue is?" The officer's eyes narrowed. He took a step closer, waving the gun slightly, trying to assert control. "Don't play smart with me. I saw you come in. Something about you feels off. Move." Every word sent a shiver through the room. Patrons instinctively moved closer to the walls, some ducking behind tables. But several people discreetly pulled out their phones, recording the tense scene. Everyone felt it, the gravity of the moment, the unpredictability of a man trained in martial arts, standing before a gun-wielding officer. Steven's friends whispered, trying to calm the situation. "Sir, please, he's not a threat," one muttered. But the officer ignored them completely. His ego and suspicion had taken full control. And yet, Steven stayed composed. Every small movement he made was precise, deliberate, and non-threatening. He subtly shifted to position himself so that the officer couldn't accidentally get anyone else in the line of fire. The calm authority he radiated was palpable. It was clear he was someone used to high-stakes situations and knew exactly how to de-escalate without provoking further aggression. Time seemed to stretch. Every patron was holding their breath. A few whispered, "Isn't that Steven Seagal?" The realization was starting to ripple through the crowd, but the officer remained unaware, still acting as if he was in control. "If you were in Steven's shoes right now, what would you do? Would you stay calm, like him, or try to fight back?" Comment below and don't forget to tell me which city or country you're watching this from right now. This simple question sent people reaching for their phones to type, feeling part of the drama themselves. Meanwhile, Steven's gaze remained steady on the officer. He wasn't looking to escalate the situation, he wasn't angry or defensive, but the calm intensity in his eyes made it clear. He would not be intimidated. His presence alone was starting to affect the officer. The man with the gun was beginning to feel the weight of responsibility not just for his authority, but for the safety of everyone around him. The bar seemed frozen in this moment, a standoff between pure aggression and absolute composure. Patrons leaned forward, caught in the suspense. Every movement of Steven's hands, every subtle breath, was being recorded, remembered, and felt. The officer, still tense, took another step closer, but Steven's quiet, unwavering confidence made even the boldest actions feel unnecessary. The stage was set, the conflict was about to escalate further, but the balance of power was slowly shifting. And all around, cameras and whispers captured one undeniable truth. This was not an ordinary confrontation. Little did anyone know, in just a few minutes, the tables would turn completely, and the one holding the gun would face consequences he never imagined. The bar had transformed from a casual evening hangout into a stage of tension that seemed to vibrate in the air. Every patron was frozen mid-action, drinks paused in hands, conversations cut short, phones hovering, ready to capture what might unfold. The neon lights flickered against the polished wooden floors, casting eerie shadows over the room, making the scene feel like a movie in real time. The officer stood with his gun pointed directly at Steven Seagal. His breaths were shallow, his knuckles white from gripping the weapon. There was a visible twitch in his shoulder, a subtle sign of anxiety that Steven noticed immediately. Yet despite the danger, Steven did not flinch. His hands remained open and raised, fingers relaxed, his body posture calm and non-threatening. The air around him carried authority, not born from violence but from presence. "Step closer," the officer barked again, his voice cracking slightly under the strain of nerves. "I said step closer." Now. Steven took one deliberate, measured step forward, not aggressively, not threateningly, just enough to show that he was present and alert. He spoke, his voice calm but commanding. "Officer, please, lower the weapon. No one needs to get hurt here." A murmur ran through the crowd. Patrons leaned against walls, clutching phones as if their devices could somehow protect them. Some whispered to friends, trying to confirm if the man standing so calmly before the gun-wielding officer was really Steven Seagal. "That's him. Isn't that Steven Seagal?" Even the officer hesitated for a brief moment, though he tried to hide it. The tension between the two men was palpable, a silent contest of nerve and composure. The officer was aggressive and reactive. Steven was calm, measured, and unshakable. Every small shift in posture, every glance, every movement of his hands carried authority, the kind that comes from a lifetime of discipline and experience in high-stakes situations. Meanwhile, the crowd's whispers began to grow louder. Someone behind the bar muttered, "I think he's really Steven Seagal." Others exchanged nervous glances, slowly realizing the gravity of what was happening. Phones recorded every motion, every word. The crowd instinctively documenting the scene for the world to see. The officer, however, was still determined to maintain control. He took another step forward, raising the gun slightly higher, his voice escalating. "I don't care who you are. Don't test me." Steven didn't flinch. His calm, controlled breathing contrasted sharply with the officer's tension. He subtly positioned himself so that his back was clear and no one around could accidentally get caught in the line of fire. Every movement was precise, calculated, and protective. At this point, the crowd was completely invested. The patrons weren't just watching a confrontation. They were witnessing a masterclass in restraint and authority. Steven's quiet strength had shifted the energy in the room. The officer was no longer the dominant figure. The tables were starting to turn. If you were in Steven's shoes right now, would you stand your ground like him, or walk away to avoid danger? Comment below, be honest, and tell us why. The question lingered in the tension-filled air, unspoken but felt by every viewer of the scene. Patrons around the bar were already debating quietly amongst themselves, wondering what they would do in such a life-or-death standoff. Steven's calm gaze met the officer's, unwavering. There was no anger, no provocation, just a silent but undeniable authority. Every word the officer barked, every gesture he made, seemed increasingly ineffective. Steven's control of the room was subtle but absolute, not through force, but through presence and composure. The officer's frustration grew. He gritted his teeth, trying to maintain dominance, but the murmurs of recognition from the crowd, coupled with the knowledge that every action was being recorded, weighed heavily on him. He was now balancing between enforcing his authority and preventing an escalation that could end badly, a delicate and stressful position he had clearly underestimated. In the background, a few bystanders whispered urgently, "Call for backup. He's not just any guy. It's Steven Seagal." The realization began spreading, like a ripple across water, slowly undermining the officer's confidence. Steven's friends moved subtly, but he motioned them to stay back. He didn't need intervention. He was already managing the chaos with his presence. Patrons were mesmerized, cameras raised, the tension rising like a pressure cooker, and then, in that suspended moment, the crowd seemed to collectively hold its breath. No one moved. No one spoke. The officer's hand trembled slightly on the gun, while Steven's calm gaze remained locked on him. The shift was almost imperceptible, but the power dynamic had begun to change. Little did anyone know, just a few seconds later, the crowd would fully realize who they were confronting, and the officer would face a shock he never expected. The room remained in tense anticipation, every heartbeat echoing the silent showdown between aggression and calm mastery. The bar had become a tense arena. The once casual chatter and laughter had vanished, replaced by the low hum of whispered speculation. Patrons leaned forward, their phones raised, capturing every subtle movement. Every eye was on the man who had stood perfectly calm in the face of a gun, Steven Seagal. The officer, still tense, tried to maintain control. His hand was steady now, but his face betrayed inner conflict. He didn't know the man he was confronting, and every second that passed without compliance made him more anxious. Around him, the bar's atmosphere thickened, the patrons' anticipation almost tangible. Then, almost like a spark igniting a flame, someone in the crowd spoke. A voice, hesitant at first, yet audible over the tension. "Wait, isn't that Steven Seagal?" The words cut through the bar like a sudden gust of wind. Heads turned, eyes widening in disbelief. Murmurs spread instantly, a ripple effect that moved through every corner of the room. "That's Steven Seagal, the action star, the martial artist." Even as whispers grew louder, the officer remained unmoved, though now his expression wavered. He had heard of Seagal. Certainly everyone had. But he had been so focused on asserting authority, so convinced of his own control, that the recognition hadn't yet penetrated his mind. Steven, as always, did not react immediately. He didn't smirk, didn't boast, and didn't try to use his fame as a shield. He remained calm, measured, his hands still visible. Yet, the subtle shift in the crowd's energy was unmistakable. People began leaning away from the officer, their attention now divided between his aggression and Steven's presence. Cameras continued to record, but the collective awe of the moment added weight to every frame. "Sir, do you know who you're dealing with?" Someone from the crowd ventured, their voice both nervous and incredulous. The officer blinked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. I don't. It doesn't matter who he is," he stammered, trying to regain composure, but the force of recognition was already reshaping the room. Patrons whispered and nudged each other. "He's a legend." Calm as ever. That's why they call him Seagal. Steven's calmness became a silent statement. He didn't need to announce his identity. His presence, composure, and the respect that rippled through the crowd were enough to establish authority not through intimidation, but through mastery of self-control. The officer's posture began to falter. He glanced around nervously, noting the phones, the patrons' whispers, and the subtle shift in attention. Every second, the balance of power was tilting further away from him. He had entered the bar assuming dominance, but now he was unsure, hesitant, and on edge. Meanwhile, the crowd's recognition spread. Someone whispered to a bartender, who quickly passed the word to others. "That's him, Steven Seagal, martial artist, Hollywood star." Suddenly, the officer was surrounded by people who knew the truth. People whose eyes were now wary of his aggression. Steven's friends, who had remained close but out of the way, exchanged glances, silently acknowledging how perfectly he handled the tension. He had maintained control without ever raising his voice or moving aggressively. Every muscle, every movement had been deliberate, a masterclass in calm under pressure. The officer, now visibly shaken, raised his voice again, trying to assert control. "I don't care who you are. Follow my orders." But even as he spoke, His tone lacked the confidence it had before. The crowd sensed the hesitation, and the whispers grew louder. "He's not afraid. The officer is losing control." Steven finally broke his silence, but only slightly, enough to address the officer calmly. "Authority is earned, not assumed. Respect is not demanded through fear. Lower the weapon, and let's resolve this without anyone getting hurt." His words landed like a hammer on the officer's already fragile composure. The room went almost silent. Patrons leaned closer, hanging on every syllable. The officer's hand trembled slightly as the gun wavered. Even the background music of the bar seemed to fade into nothingness, leaving only the weight of the moment. If you were in this bar and realized it was Steven Seagal standing calmly in front of a gun, what would you do? Comment below. Would you step back in awe, help defuse the situation, or try to intervene? The realization fully dawned on the officer. The man he had threatened, the man he assumed was just another bar patron, was a master of martial arts, a legend, and someone whose presence commanded respect without a single aggressive move. The crowd's energy, the recordings, the collective whispers, all combined to dismantle his assumed control. Steven's calm authority had done what no shouting or threats could. It had shifted the balance of power. The officer was no longer the dominant figure in the room. He was now the man under scrutiny, the man whose actions were being silently judged by everyone present. As tension hung thick in the air, Steven remained composed, letting the recognition speak for itself. His silence was powerful, his calmness undeniable. Patrons felt the weight of the moment. They were witnessing a true master of composure, someone who could command respect without violence, fame, or force. Little did the officer know, the moment of recognition was just the beginning. In the next few minutes, he would realize that his actions had consequences, and Steven Seagal's calm was about to turn the tables completely. The bar was electric with tension. Every patron felt it, every phone camera captured it, and every whisper seemed louder than before. Steven Seagal stood calm in the center of it all, a pillar of control in a room teetering on the edge of chaos. The officer, however, was unraveling. His hand wavered on the gun, his jaw clenched tightly, and his eyes darted nervously from Steven to the recording phones, to the crowd, back to Steven. Step aside now," the officer barked, his voice losing its earlier confidence. The words came out sharp, but they lacked authority. His ego, once so sure, was now cracking under the weight of recognition, the tension in the crowd, and the undeniable presence of Steven Seagal. Steven took a slow, deliberate step forward, not aggressive, not confrontational, just forward. His eyes never left the officer's, steady, calm, and unwavering. "Officer, please put the gun down," he said, voice low, firm, and commanding. "No one needs to get hurt. This can end peacefully, right here, right now." Every patron leaned forward instinctively. They could feel the power in his words, the subtle command that came not from shouting but from pure composure. The officer's hands trembled slightly on the weapon. Every muscle in his body betrayed tension, and the whispers of recognition from the crowd made him increasingly aware that he was no longer the one in control. Someone in the back muttered, "He's not just calm, he's a master. Look at him, he's not flinching at all." Another whispered to a friend, "This is insane, the officer is losing it." Steven's calm authority had shifted the energy completely. The officer tried to regain control, waving the gun slightly, attempting to assert dominance. "I said, step back, now," Steven responded with quiet precision, not raising his voice, not showing anger. He subtly moved his stance, positioning himself so that his body was open but safe, every movement calculated to prevent escalation. Patrons noticed even the most fearful, felt a sense of reassurance in his poise. His presence alone was commanding the room, influencing every observer and subtly undermining the officer's aggression. The officer's confidence wavered further as murmurs of recognition grew louder. "That's Steven Seagal," one bystander whispered loudly. And the words spread like wildfire. Martial arts legend, Hollywood star. The realization was like a shockwave. The officer's face went pale. His words grew frantic and defensive, but each command felt increasingly hollow. Every patron, every camera recording the scene, every whisper was now a silent judge of his actions. He had walked in, expecting control, expecting compliance, expecting to intimidate, but none of it worked. Steven, with eyes locked on him, spoke again, calm, deliberate, and strong. Authority is not fear. Power is not intimidation. You are responsible for your actions. Lower the weapon and do the right thing. Now. The words landed heavy in the room. Patrons froze, phones raised higher. The crowd sensed the turning point. The officer's trembling grew more obvious. He was no longer leading the scene, he was reacting, cornered by his own aggression, the crowd's awareness, and Steven's unwavering calm. Even subtle gestures mattered. Steven's posture, the controlled breathing, the slight step forward, all communicated dominance without aggression. Every second he remained calm eroded the officer's confidence further. He tried a final, desperate attempt to assert himself. I'm in charge here, he shouted, but the force in his voice faltered, shaking, unconvincing. At that moment, a few bystanders began murmuring urgently to the others. Call for backup. Now. The guy's not acting right. The officer's eyes flickered to the doorway, where he noticed the faint sound of approaching sirens. Backup was on the way. Steven didn't need to move aggressively. His calm, authoritative presence, paired with the imminent arrival of additional officers and the recognition from the crowd, had done the work for him. Every passing second made it clearer. The officer who had pulled the gun was losing this standoff, not through force, but through his own poor judgment and the unshakable composure of Steven Seagal. The crowd, sensing the reversal of power, leaned back slightly, whispering among themselves, their tension mixed with awe. Cameras captured every detail, ensuring the moment would be replayed, and shared a testament to the effectiveness of calm authority over aggression. Could you stay calm if someone pulled a gun on you? Comment below, would you keep your cool like Steven, or react differently? The stage was fully set for the next critical moment. The officer would face consequences for his reckless actions. The crowd's murmurs, the approaching backup, and Steven's commanding presence made it inevitable. The standoff had reached its climax. The officer's initial aggression had completely unraveled, and all around, cameras and whispers documented the extraordinary display of calm, courage, and authority. In just a few minutes, the arrival of backup would turn the tables completely, and the officer who drew the gun would find himself on the other side of the law. The tension in the bar was almost unbearable. Patrons held their breath, some frozen in place, some gripping phones tightly, recording every second. Steven Seagal remained calm, his presence commanding the room. But his eyes were alert, watching, anticipating, ready to react if needed. The officer, on the other hand, was unraveling. His hand still hovered near the gun, but his earlier confidence had evaporated completely. A sudden sound at the doorway drew everyone's attention, the faint but unmistakable siren wail of backup officers arriving. Within seconds, 2 uniformed officers entered, surveying the scene quickly. One of them immediately recognized the situation and the man in the center of it. "Sir," the backup officer said firmly to the aggressive cop, "step away from the weapon. Put it down now." The first officer's face turned pale. His grip on the gun tightened for a split second, then faltered. The power dynamic had shifted completely. He was no longer in control. The authority he had assumed when he drew the gun had been stripped away, replaced by a combination of crowd scrutiny, Steven Seagal's unwavering composure, and the presence of trained backup. Steven remained in the middle of the bar, calm, hands still visible. He didn't need to raise his voice or make any sudden moves. His calmness was his weapon, commanding respect from everyone, patrons, officers, and even the errant cop who had threatened him minutes earlier. "Lower the weapon," Steven said, voice steady but carrying weight. "There's no need for this to escalate any further. Everyone is safe. You just need to do the right thing." The first officer hesitated, his mind racing. Every camera in the room, every whisper from the crowd, every word Steven had spoken, now weighed on him. The reality was undeniable. His reckless aggression had been exposed, and there was no way to reclaim control. Finally, with a reluctant motion, the officer slowly lowered the gun. Backup officers immediately stepped forward, gently but firmly restraining him, securing his hands behind his back with handcuffs. The crowd erupted into soft cheers, some clapping, others whispering in awe. Patrons who had feared for their safety now witnessed justice unfold, a reversal that no one expected when the officer first drew his weapon. The aggressive cop, once a figure of dominance, was now the one facing consequences. He was guided out of the bar by backup, his face pale and full of shame. The murmurs from the crowd followed him, whispers of disbelief, admiration for Steven, and quiet relief that the situation had ended without anyone getting hurt. Steven's composure never faltered. He raised a hand slightly, signaling for the crowd to calm down. His voice, low and deliberate, carried across the room. "Everyone, please, there's no need for mockery or anger. The point is simple. Respect and responsibility matter. Fear should never be a tool for authority." The patrons nodded, their tension easing. Phones continued to record, capturing not only the arrest but also Steven's measured response, ensuring that his calm integrity would be shared widely. If you were Steven in this moment, would you have forgiven the officer or demanded consequences? Type yes if you believe in forgiveness, or no if you think he should face justice. The crowd's whispers and phone recordings amplified the lesson. Steven's calm authority, paired with the officer's visible downfall, made the moral of the situation crystal clear. It wasn't just about the immediate confrontation. It was a demonstration of courage, restraint, and the power of staying composed under extreme pressure. Meanwhile, the backup officers began taking statements from witnesses, ensuring that the errant officer would face proper legal consequences. The patrons, once fearful, now felt a mix of relief and admiration. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a situation that could have ended in tragedy, diffused not by aggression, but by the calm mastery of a single man. Steven finally addressed his friends, nodding subtly, signaling that the ordeal was over. The bar began to return to a semblance of normalcy, though the memory of what had happened would linger. Patrons continued recording, sharing snippets on social media, ensuring that the story would go viral, a real-life lesson in courage, calm, and accountability. The officer, now outside, faced the consequences of his reckless actions. The crowd's recognition of Steven, combined with the backup officer's intervention, ensured that justice was served, all without a single person getting hurt. Steven, ever composed, reminded everyone quietly, "Authority is not power over others. True strength is restraint, responsibility, and respect." The bar slowly returned to normal, but the impact of the moment lingered. Everyone had witnessed a masterclass in courage, calm, and integrity. And the story, captured on countless phones, was already beginning its journey across social media, reaching millions who would marvel at the same lesson. Composure and wisdom always outweigh aggression and impulsiveness. Within hours, the video of the incident would spread across the world, showing Steven Seagal's calm under pressure, the officer's downfall, and a powerful lesson everyone needed to see. The bar had returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the energy lingered like a static charge in the air. Patrons whispered excitedly, showing each other the recordings they had captured on their phones. Every frame told the same story. A calm, composed Steven Seagal facing a gun-wielding officer, diffusing a potentially dangerous situation with sheer presence and discipline. Within minutes, some patrons uploaded snippets to social media. Videos spread quickly, first locally, then nationally, and soon, the footage went viral worldwide. Tens of thousands of viewers watched in awe as Steven's calm mastery contrasted sharply with the officer's escalating aggression and eventual restraint. News outlets picked up the story, broadcasting it across television and online platforms. Headlines screamed, "Steven Seagal stands down. Armed officer, courage and composure, win the day. Action star diffuses dangerous situation in Nevada bar. Calm versus chaos, how Steven Seagal handled a gun-wielding cop." Across social media, the video racked up millions of views within hours. Comments flooded in from people all over the globe. Admiration, disbelief, and inspiration. Many wrote about how the situation demonstrated real courage, the kind that doesn't rely on physical violence, fame, or intimidation. It was the quiet authority, calm presence, and disciplined mind of Steven Seagal that had turned the tide. The officer faced immediate scrutiny and disciplinary action. Investigations began, not only because of the gun being drawn in a public setting, but because it was captured in clear, undeniable video. Legal consequences were inevitable, and his credibility had been shattered. The story served as a stark reminder. Authority comes with responsibility, and recklessness has consequences. Meanwhile, Steven's reputation soared even higher. Patrons who had been in the bar shared first-hand accounts, emphasizing his composure, strategic thinking, and restraint. He didn't gloat, didn't use fame as leverage, and didn't humiliate the officer. Instead, he modeled exactly how to respond under extreme pressure, calmly, decisively, and with integrity. The video inspired discussions far beyond the bar itself. Martial arts forums praised his discipline. Leadership seminars cited the incident as a real-life case study in conflict resolution. Psychology communities dissected his calm approach, analyzing how presence, posture, and tone can influence a tense situation without escalating it. Teachers and parents shared the story with children as an example of courage under pressure. Even global fans of Steven Seagal responded. Many expressed admiration for his humility. He could have escalated the situation, intimidated the officer, or even showcased his physical abilities. But instead, he chose a path of restraint and respect, and the world noticed. Social media posts included comments such as, "This is the real action hero, calm under pressure. We need more people like Steven Seagal in the world." The officer learned a lesson he'll never forget, and so will everyone watching. If you believe real strength comes from staying calm under pressure, type respect in the comments. Share this story with your friends to show them the power of composure, courage, and integrity. And don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable real-life stories like this one. The bar incident had started as an ordinary night out, yet, through Steven Seagal's discipline, calm, and unwavering authority, it became a worldwide lesson in courage. Millions now knew that true strength isn't measured by the weapon you hold or the volume of your voice. It's measured by self-control, awareness, and the ability to command respect without aggression. By the end of the day, the story had reached people on every continent. People who had never been to Nevada or even the United States felt connected to the moment through the viral videos and social media shares. Steven's calm in the face of danger had transcended nationality, culture, and language, inspiring millions to consider how they would act when confronted with fear or aggression. The officer's recklessness became a cautionary tale. Steven's restraint became a shining example of composure. The world watched, learned, and shared. And long after the initial tension had passed, one thing was clear. Moments of calm and courage leave a mark that outlasts any flash of anger, fear, or intimidation.